Yes. All good. Okay. You have not seen. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. 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 Let me see. I think there's one other thing that was turning the system to behave. Okay. For anyone joining me, please, if you need to invite someone, do well to invite them. I hope the sound is speaking. Hello, hello, hello. Yes, I think the sound is better now. Yes, we're back again here today. And in case this is the first time you are joining me, and if you're not very quite familiar with this journey, my name is Victor Prince Dixon, the transformer. For many who know, I am very obsessed with that consistent hunger, that obsession to see how the average human being should, and would be optimized. For me, it's quite simple. I know the most trendy talks presently is about AI. Everyone is just making that effort to be AI compliant. Everything is now artificial intelligence, being deployed at every level. But then, for me, I think that as much as um, artificial intelligence is on board, we still have that human intelligence that I think has been less untapped. Before the world became so technologically advanced, we had human intelligence. It was the mind of human beings that built the present world. I mean, you need to go back as far back as the ancient days, as old as the primitive world when we had to, rub stones and sticks to be able to get fire. And here we are, thousands and thousands of years after we've been able to, you know, even just with motion, bring up fire. That tells you a lot. That tells you you're dealing with ingenuity of human beings. And therefore, to think that because technology is on board, because AI is trendy, we no longer need that intelligence that has built the world, and even the intelligence that built the AI we're talking about. I think that is us missing the point. And so, for me, I believe that as the world keep advancing technologically, as we keep deploying technology AI across board, one fact is sure, and the fact is that as humans, we must consistently also keep upgrading, expand our quality of thoughts, both at the horizontal and also on the vertical level. That consistency to improve what man can offer. I never fail to lay the foundations for which what drives what I do. Like I said, I believe without any form of doubt until I get a better information or data that will prove otherwise. Everyone is divided into two. Everybody on planet Earth, irrespective of class, age, generation, and the rest. The fact remains everyone is either a human asset or a human liability. And human asset, I said, simply means those who give more than what they take. It means they invest more than they withdraw, they deposit more in terms of relationship value, creativity, innovation, in terms of everything. They just bring more to the table than they take. And so for them, they are asset. It means the world consistently, progresses because of them. And then on the other hand, you have human liabilities, whose major work is to withdraw more than they deposit. And so for them, there is really no growth in relationship, even in work. For them, it's about taking more. And so the world does not progress because of that kind of act, that kind of mindset or perspective. The implication, therefore, is that if you have more human liabilities on planet Earth, the consequence is that the world will not grow well. It cannot accelerate in terms of growth because you have more people taking out than they are putting in. The consequence is retrogression. I really do not believe in stagnation, kind of, because time will always play out. Either you're progressing or you're retrogressing as that. So that has been my foundation. And then the key things I've been doing so far, my experience in the field has taught me is I have decided to make sure that I have a Facebook Live every Friday to discuss personal development. How do you build yourself as a person? But then I have YouTube Live on Mondays to discuss how best you can build your team. The organization is strictly more for the institutional environment, just so that you understand how to deal with people, organizations, teams. Basically that's how it is. So for the last week, we focused on industrial loneliness. We looked at one of the things that have become a very silent pandemic in organizations. A lot of investment has been made in terms of technical investment and the rest of them. We do a lot of SOPs, agreed, a lot of structures in principle. The entire processes, all the T's have been crossed, all the I's dotted. But then you get to find out that at the end of the day, we still don't get the kind of result we want. You see organizations that have done a lot of headhunting and bringing some of the best brain around the world, but yet they still don't get the kind of result they expect to get. And the reason is because while you have the best of brain with you, you don't have the best of hearts with you. And then if you understand performance very well, every level of performance, every level of growth, um, every level of improvement in organization is highly dependent on the three H metrics. That is the head, the heart, and the hands. The head, heart, and hands is very crucial. You can have a very good head, but a poor heart. And so what that means, you'll be suffering some kind of discretional effort in terms of productivity. And but loneliness has become one major thing that most organizations have not really paid attention to, and also the consequence of it. And the reason is simple: the world has, come with a lot of complexity, a lot of ambiguity that comes with uncertainty, and the rest of it. The entire VUCA and then the Bani, experience. For that, most people, because they are not very well equipped to manage all this complexity, they decide to withdraw. So for them, their reaction, their template for managing a chaotic environment is withdrawal. And that withdrawal sets in motion something extremely very dangerous. By withdrawing, they set in motion the process of isolation because they are running away from complexity in relationship, complexity in teams, um, complexity in families, and the rest of them, and then social, complexity. At the end of the day, they create a situation where they are all by themselves. They disconnect from groups, from tribes, from family, from traditional institutions that offer some level of protection, some level of warmth. So at the end of the day, they are solo alone. And that is when, from isolation, they enter into aloneness. From aloneness, they enter into loneliness. Now, that would have been personal, but these are the people who still find their way back into the place of work. You have them as managers, um, team leaders, CEOs. You just have them as even HRs. So at the end of the day, the implication is that those personal find their way back into the boardroom, and that's where the problem begins. And because of that, you're having those who are struggling, but they take that their struggle into the organization. And there is no, so far, despite the presence of very high level of assessment, which very few people are really taking, most people find their way through. How many organizations are really going through the high definition, high precision assessment to be able to even dig deeper to understand those emotional challenges that most people are going through? Very few. So, to that extent, many organizations don't really have anything to audit the emotions, the level of grievances, the level of meaninglessness, the level of identity crisis that individuals are going through. And these are the things they bring again back into the organization. And that is what creates that industrial loneliness for which, I took some time out to see our best to explore last week. So for this week, I see it as a concluding part of that conversation. And so for that, what I intend doing, therefore, is to look at pick a few thoughts from one of my books on designing a healthy workplace, so that we see briefly some few elements, how it matters and how best you can deploy that as a team lead, as a CEO or a member of the C-suite. How can you bring this into organization and see how you can, rejig your work culture and see how to retemplate the entire ecosystem, just so that you have an organization that it's very mindful of these realities and these challenges. You may not stop them, but you'll be able to create an environment that will not accommodate it, kind of, but an environment that will process it, understand it, and see how best you can harness the best of that kind of situation, and even in the process, even heal, provide some level of healing, in the entire workforce. Because by so doing, then you have triggered collective discretional effort. You have optimized the human, who, by optimizing them, you get the best result. Yeah, technicality is good. AI brings efficiency. Technology drives some level of, process and grand speed, which matters a lot. But anyhow you go about it, you're still dealing with humans who need to engage these processes, this high investment flow. And if those people are not harmonized, and when I mean harmonized, I mean their head, their heart, and their hands, harmonized, you're going to have a very high critical person who is having some emotional challenge and cannot connect, to be present at every given point. You may have very high skilled workers who are high thinkers, but then their heart is just not there in the organization. And the implication, the consequence again, is always low performance. So while there are different reasons to why organizations suffer this low performance, I believe very strongly, with my work as a consultant and coach, the organizational workplace have taught me clearly what I've learned in the field, read in books, and I've experienced in the practical terms of it, that you have to be very intentional as an organization, as a team lead, as a CEO, the founder. You have to make sure that you go over and beyond to be able to create an ecosystem that is very consistent with the kind of result and performance you need. It's not about people just coming to work, paying them the good salary, having good entry points, doing all the HR works. No, it's about going beyond that to know that you may need to look at humans, let me put it that way, from a perspective that I need to trigger them to give me the kind of result that I want. And if I have to trigger them, if I have to improve the performance drive, yes, vacations, yes, bonuses, work, all those goodies make sense. But major challenges are internal. You have to create a mechanism that will provide a lot of answers and solutions to those internal inconsistencies. It's ability to do that that takes you to the next phase where you get the kind of result perhaps you were never expecting. So today I'll be focusing again on designing a healthy workplace in view, of what I have laid those foundations for. And the first thing you do if you're designing a healthy workplace is there are four things to consider. I believe if you dig deeper into it, it's read more and maybe you're more expansive. to the point you open your heart to know more about this, you understand how important it is. Don't forget that what we're doing is just to provide insight, provide some level of appreciation of the excuse me, in the entire journey, just so much you can deploy it properly. The first thing to look at, there are four very important, uh, very critical elements that are very, very, very crucial if you want to design a healthy workforce. Very, very, very important. That are non-negotiables, especially in the face of the challenge, the kind of challenges we are facing today, whether you're dealing with the global perspective, the regional perspective, even the local realities. And therefore, one of them, the four of them are one, energy, meaning, safety and growth. But let me try to explain a little of each. The first one is energy. Human being is a bundle of energy. Every human being, at the very best, is a bundle of energy. And so, whatever their intentions, whatever their vision and plan, their energy plays a big role on how they deliver, on the performance, and even the weight, the depth, even the quality and the speed of those performance. So, it is very necessary to understand the logic of the glucose level in a very, in your team. Because the ability to understand that will help you understand when your team biologically, based on clock, at their very best to deal with very high demanding performance work, and when it is at the medium, when it is as a low, very necessary. Because you don't need to understand that logically, if you look at the biological lens, you know that there's a place of glucose, there is a place of hormones, and all of this plays a role in performance, especially when you're looking at how to get the best and high performance from any team member. What that tells you is that first, while the brain may be 2% of the entire body, you will have to understand also that the brain consumes percent of the energy, of the entire body. What that means is that it is your duty to know that the brain, your team member's brain, is your engine room. And this engine room draws support, draws energy from the entire body fluid, to the entire health of the body. And based on that, the logic that comes with it, therefore, is that when you're designing a workspace, when you're designing the entire workflow, one of the key things you must pay attention to is like the rhythm of the body. We have what we call the circadian rhythm when you were dealing with sleep, and waking up. And that is where you're dealing with conservation of energy, management of energy, where the energy becomes ready for work the next day. So entirely, a, a good C-suite executives looks at the organization, look at the entire workflow, the vision, the speed, and the result they want to get. And then you design the entire workflow to meet these biological concerns. And my advice has always been, my best recommendation has always been, try to make sure you can divide the work perhaps into what we call the deep, the shallow, and then the recover. Meaning you pick any work, any kind of work you have, whatever the target is, and break it into three. You have to ask yourself, within the process of this work, which one is the most heaviest? The one that demands the highest level of strategy, the higher level of critical thinking and creativity. It means you're dealing with very dense and very high demanding energy at that point in time. Those kind of works are supposed to be situated when your team members are they are very fresh, where they are the most alert, where they are the most ready to work. This is when they pay attention to those kind of work. Why? Because their body rhythm, their hormones, the glucose, the entire energy level can match the demand of the workflow. But you have to target it. You have to create a rhythm for it. You have to find the rhythm of, and that means you may need to know the biological rhythm of the entire team or the team members, the team groups. To be able to understand each and every one of them. Look, these people, they are they work better in the morning because perhaps they are well rested, or some of them they do better when they have that power nap. Then ability to understand that biological rhythm helps you understand that when biology is at its highest, you're going to get the best performance. And but when it's at its lowest, even if the person is interested in walking, you're going to have that biological friction, because that energy friction will be there. There will be a challenge with it. And so it's your duty to understand heavy work, very deep work, for when they are fresh. And then the next is, the shallow work is when you feel they have been stressed for a while. They don't need all the attention in the world, but the work is in the middle. Then you have what they call recovery. And that recovery is, how do you create a space, a time, an activity that actually helps the energy to rebound more. And sometimes not just about what they eat, is about what that environment is all about. Is being very specific and intentional in creating an environment that re-energizes them. So if you're able to have that rhythm where you have deep shallow recovery, then after a while you have created a work environment that matches the energy state of your team members. And believe you me, they will give you a result you never thought possible. Oftentimes, most people may take some of the high density work and then give it to their team, to look at it when they are tired, sapped out, energy is almost zero, and then you give them a job to do. What that means is that what should have taken 1 hour may take 3 hours, because at that point, their biological clock is low. Their glucose level is extremely low. Their hormones have been so stressed that the communication is that, look, let's shut down. And at that point in time, that's not when you give someone a very high level report to be able to digest, to prepare, or, to interpret. Do that, you're going to have some serious organizational challenge. The next thing, element you must consider if you're building a healthy environment. And even before I pass, I think there are a few things I may need to share. When I talk about energy here, you need to know there is that physical energy, I agree, but also emotions also carries its own energy. Then mental energy, then you have the purpose energy. So entirely, if you look at all of them, it becomes an issue, because energy is, in principle, is actually always going to demand a lot of what you may call deposits. And so if you don't have those deposits, they start becoming an issues. And that is why most people don't get the kind of results they, they really want. The next thing you have to look at is what we call meaning. Most organizations don't understand that meaning means a lot to everybody who comes to work. For them, unfortunately, we still have this traditional lens of looking at anyone who comes into our team. They are just a numerical basket of support and contribution, not a living being. If you understand that very well, then you understand that no one comes to your organization without always asking questions about what are they doing here? Does it match where I'm going to in life? Is this what I want? Am I proud to be part of this team? So for them, effort means a lot. They begin to ask themselves questions. I'm putting effort here, but is it worth it? Does it matter? Because they are processing their effort, they are processing their entire time, they are processing everything, they are adding to the value, to the entire value chain. Now, for many, it's about clocking in. They just came into the place of what they clock, they have their schedule, they go into it and they finish it. Nobody can live like that for long. After a while, questions will begin, because every human being has that clocks that consistently drags them out, asking them, where are you heading to? Is your life worth it? Um, really, are you fulfilled? All that you're doing, does it? What exactly is the meaning? And so immediately you get to that point, questions abound to be triggered. And when those questions come, they will ask everyone, including their the organization, including where they come to work every day. Because you know that every morning, even when you're tired, you have to still wake up and go to this organization. Yes, it's paying the bills, but after a while, the questions begin to come beyond the bills. What next? And when those questions come, if your organization have not created an ecosystem that provide the proper meaning, then that's where the challenge comes. Because that's when you start seeing a biological process that connects with the chemistry of the human body to eventually influence performance, decisions, and then behavior. You pay for it if you really don't, you didn't put your house in order. And because here you're dealing, most times people do what they call communicated, um, you know, meaning. They just, you just have perhaps what you call um, your vision board, and then people get to see that vision board. You write the purpose of the organization. Now everyone can read that thing, hang it, and then be looking at it. But sometimes, I've, especially as a consultant and even as a coach, I've seen organizations who have visions for which truly the CEO don't believe in it, the founder really don't believe in it. It makes sense to write it down because it is more or less a brand demand, not necessarily born out of conviction. It is more or less the market likes it that way, so let's just tell them. But it's not something that comes from within. And so, to a large extent, you may have it framed, but it's not framed in the heart. And so, in that kind of situation, what you will see an organization that have humanity as our number one concern. But when you check the entire transactions, when you take the products and the services and the entire experience they create, they really don't care for humanity. They just care for profit. They are just concerned. For them, at any point in time, is return on investment, is the revenue that's their drive. Whatever happens, if you have to. So in that kind of scenario, you have a different frame on the world, but by culture, an entirely different frame for which most of them can be in conflict. And so here you are with someone who is struggling, trying to make sense of their life, trying to make sense of the direction where they are heading to. They begin to ask questions. Questions such as, what I'm doing here, does it really matter? Does it make sense? Does it connect in any way to where I'm heading to? Am I seen even in the process? And that is where a big challenge can begin. So at this point, we're not struggling with skills and competence. No, that's not what we're struggling with. We're just struggling with direction. If you're not very careful, you start having opposing directions in the same organization. And that is why sometimes organizational culture really do not translate to the kind of performance for which we expect it to, because there are a lot of internal workings for which, if it is not properly corrected to the level of alignment, it becomes an issue. And so this is where, as a team lead, as a leader, what you must do is you must create what we call a clear line of sight. You must make sure everybody in that organization understand clearly to the point where they can defend it for and by themselves the impact of that organization and how that impacts an individual contribution and then a collective, offer. They have to see their value in the organization's presentation. They have to know they matter. For each product that comes out, they are supposed to somewhere along the line see themselves in that product. For every offer that the organization offer, they must be able to see their sweat, see their thoughts, see their ideas, see their those little thoughts of their contributions. They have to see it, they have to feel it, they have to know, I am, this product is because I am in this organization. This service is doing well because I am in this organization. That ability to see themselves in the brand, in the offer of the brand, in the benefits of the brand, is where they derive their meaning. This is what gives them the energy to wake up in the morning and feel, look, I matter in the scheme of things. Otherwise, they get lost in the entire structure, models, and then the operational flow of the organization. And that is why most people struggle with personal meaning in that kind of situation. They look at that relational meaning. What's my relationship with everyone here? Do I make sense? If I disappear today, will it matter? Am I replaceable? Am I replaceable? If anything happens to me, who cares? Will I just be one of those insurance log? These are the questions they ask. This contributing meaning, am I really making sense? And that is the work of a leader. You must be able to work extremely very hard to communicate these things. Because if not, then you're going to have some serious challenges, along the line. And then again, this is how and why most organizations invest a lot and then still have a lot of issues along the line. So the next we're going to look at is safety. Now, safety matters a lot. For most people, you may underestimate how safety is, but then everybody knows safety matters a lot. And there's what we call the concept of neuroception. Because you see, somewhere along the line, when a person or an individual or a team is not feeling very safe in organization, it has something it does to their brain. It affects how the brain processes the environment, processes the responsibility, processes the title, processes the duty, processes everything that comes to them. And so it's very important. I think this is where emotional intelligence comes to play. That ability for the leader to be able to understand, look, yes, there are physical safety needs, all those SOPs and the operational standards. Those one are busy. Industry standard can always handle that. But you see, as it stands now, there's really no what I may call the best of standard when it comes to how do you make a staff feel internally safe for being in an organization. I mean, everything can be okay, but there are internal challenges for which everyone comes to that organization. And so, what are you going to do? And oftentimes, it is tied to organizational culture. Now, whether you're trying to provide safety nets in terms of have um, psychological safety apparatus or maybe psychological safety models, you know, modalities in place. It matters a lot for an individual to feel very, very comfortable in the organization. Because somewhere along the line, um, most leaders are more concerned because they are transactional leaders. They are more concerned in getting a lot of safety, yeah, a lot of result rather. They're highly transactional. So for them, it's just their revenue that they are more concerned about. So they're really not too crazy in terms of making sure everybody who comes to the organization is extremely very comfortable. No, there are things they don't consider. So if you're a team lead, a CEO who really wants to um, pay a little bit more attention to safety, but these are the few safety that I will expect you to be more intentional about. And the first one is that you must normalize voice. Yes, people, you call it normalized voice is a concept behind psychological safety that says you must make people feel comfortable enough to voice their thoughts, to share what they think in a given scenario, meaning they have to speak without fear. You're dealing with people who have thoughts sometimes that may be opposing the general norm, or perhaps even that of the CEO, the team lead. And so, somewhere along the line, you need to have someone have that capacity to be able to voice their thoughts. So, which means you must normalize that capacity for people to say what they think within a given scenario, knowing fully well that it is from a contributory perspective. They are like putting all they think into a box, and then you still sift it out and make the best out of it. You don't shush people from expressing um, their resistance to certain project ideas, resistance to modalities, resistance to timeline, resistance to even a product or a service. No, you don't. You don't really stop people from thinking one innovation may fly, another innovation may not fly. It is their kind of right, because the essence to why they're in that organization is that you are harvesting what you may call their assets, both emotionally and mentally. So you must be able to give them a room to voice their thoughts and even their feelings. Then the next thing you must do is you must redefine error. Mistakes should be treated as data for learning, not evidence for punishment. Oftentimes, most people see mistake or an error like, oh wow, this one needs to be punished. It need a query. Just it's something that people are scared to do. And oftentimes, every form of innovation, high level of creativity, begins when an error ends. And so, to experience, the best of them, the best of ideas come actually from you make mistake, and you think is a mistake, but you look at it from a different lens, and you notice, with a little correction here and there, a little positioning and repositioning, a little reframing, you have created something new. Innovation has come up. And so, if you don't allow people make those mistakes, it's you stopping people from, experiencing something new, from challenging their imagination, from exploring their imagination. It becomes a problem. Then the next, you have to train leaders in emotional regulation, because you need to understand that every leader embodies the energy in the room. And so a leader's emotional state becomes the team's environment. Peop there's a concept of what we call emotional leakage. People leak energy. They don't need to say it, but an angry person will just sit down. You will just feel the air becomes a little bit dense, a little bit thicker, without saying much, without even looking at their face or their expressions. Why? Because people leak energy. Energy always leak. And so the entire embodiment of a leader will always leak in the organization. And if a leader has embodied a situation where the environment is not safe at all, you will feel it in their presence. Even you feel it even in their absence. And so it's necessary that a leader must also regulate themselves to understand that what they feel possibly is going to be an infection, because of the concept of emotional contagion. Is going to infect the environment and everybody involved. The next thing you must do is you must build feedback loops. Safe environment allows upward feedback, not just downward control. It's not at every point in time you look at everyone and making sure everybody's seated, everybody's balanced. No, sometimes you allow people, to send some message up. But most importantly, you must create clarity, because nothing makes an organization, team members in the organization to be unsafe like uncertainty, because uncertainty increases perceived threat while clarity reduces it. So it is your duty to make sure that the organization is so clear, so certain in its direction that it doesn't give room for argument. Then the next thing I want us to look at is we have to look at growth. Yes, growth. Growth is the last of the element. And what basically is growth? Growth may mean something for different people. Um, for many, promotion means growth. Most organizations, for them, they've reduced growth into promotion. And for them, as long as you're working here and you're promoted, that's growth for you. But if you go a little bit beyond the lens and deeper, you get to realize that growth has its own dynamics. And as a leader, as an organization, it's necessary you begin to look at, again, don't forget the keyword is intentionally designing, a healthy workplace. This is an intentional thing. It's not an accident. It's something a CEO and a leader sits down and decides to invest in making sure that the environment is so healthy that it brings out the best from the team members. Now, one of the things you look at perspective to growth is that you have to look at growth. That growth happens at the edge of comfort, but without proper support, challenges become, stress. For growth to occur for many is that there must be some kind of support structure for them to make their mistakes and then improve in the process. Yes, sometimes we want people to improve, but we don't provide the support, the supporting um, platform to drive that growth we want out of them. So one of the first things to do is to make sure the environment generally is designed to make sure that there is a culture. Look, you can be better even when, as you can make mistakes, but you can be better. But you can only be better if you make mistake. So we like the fact that we do not celebrate mistake every day, but we expect that as long as you're making effort, you're getting better, your mistakes is understandable, and you provide some support and structure for that. And the next thing you must do is you must provide what they call a continuous learning system. Learning must not be occasional, no. It must be embedded in the flow of work. You see, most times we talk about succession planning, but oftentimes we just have it as a template in terms of the structural leadership, but don't embed it into the entire workflow. Nobody should even know that you are part of a succession strategy. It should already be built into the flow. For you, you're working, but what you don't know is that you're being prepared. That's how good an intentional organization set their house in order. The third is feedback as development. For many, feedback should not just be evaluated, but you should find a way to expand capability. When you get a feedback, or when you give a feedback, it should be something that challenges them to do more, kind of. The next is exposure and experience. Obviously, some organizations do that, which is where growth accelerates when people are exposed to new rules, new perspective, and new problems. It's not every problem, but it's not every workflow that you are assigned that you expect it to come out better. No. Especially if you have a growth mindset. Some you give, it can be modeled up, but somewhere along the line, the whole idea was in the process of modeling this up, you're going to learn something. And so that becomes a very casual um, an organizational cultural model in making sure people are pushed into the growth pathway. And then the next is clear development pathways. People must see where they are, where they can go, and how to get there. So there must be that clarity. This is where you are now, but this is where opportunity, exists. And these are the process of getting this opportunity. Don't just tell people in an organization, well, that's the organizational culture. It depends on you. Find your way. And if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, but let people know that look, they're very interested and they must do this. Because you see, when growth is absent, what follows is that talent will just get to a point and it just ends. And then you get to see innovation will slow down and then engagement will begin to decline. So you see someone that has been doing quite well, after a while just feels, I've stayed here for 10 years and there is nothing special, there's nothing to do. So let me let it go. The consequence of this is that when growth is absent, what follows is that um, beyond, innovation slowing down and start engagement begins to decline. What you suffer is that you see is that a deep insight is that growth is not just individuals but systemic, because when individuals grow, teams improve, organizations strengthens, and society evolve. This allow workplace to become a development engine, not just an economic unit. You see, the truth is that the very hard one is that you cannot retain ambitious and capable people in an environment where they are not growing. At best, they will stay temporarily, but at worst, they will disengage while remaining. So you see them there, they still are in the organization, they come to work every day, but somewhere along the line, they are beginning to separate their energy. They are beginning to reallocate their commitment. They are beginning to even their meaning. They are beginning to separate them. So you see someone comes to work but already has where their intentions are. So at the very best, they are just um, making the best of a sad experience, but where their thoughts and the best of what they have in mind is elsewhere. And this is where most organizations fail. Not necessarily because they have all those challenges, but because you just get to a point and then if you're not very careful, everything just, goes sour. So the whole idea is that for you to build a healthy organization, healthy workplace, you must always remember this energy must be critical. And what is energy? I have the capacity to function and perform. That is what that environment must always remind your team members. Then you must always look at meaning. What do I do? What I do matters to me and also beyond me. What safety? I can exist, express, and contribute without fear. I am becoming more through this experience. That is growth. Because you see, energy without meaning will always lead to exhaustion. That's one major factor most organizations are learning the hard way. And then meaning without safety is what people feel like suppression in an organization. And so they feel stifled, kind of. And then when you have safety without growth, people become comfortable with stagnation because here they are safe, agreed, but there is no growth. So for them, they become very comfortable with stagnation. And finally, growth without energy is burnout. When you bring growth to the table, then there is no energy to find that balance. People will work, work, and get stressed out. And by being stressed out, it leads to burnout. So at the end of the day, the best brain will be exhausted. Brain might easily cross over to depression. Your best brain might easily cross over even to loneliness. Because at the end of the day, yes, there is growth. The organization revenue, the flow is doing very well. But because they are growing, because they are contributing, you keep taking away from them, taking. After a while, there is growth, there is performance, the revenue is soaring, but there is no energy. And even not, it's not going to be a matter of intention. The body will just collapse. And this is why you see some of the best organizations, they rise and they go down. And so a smart leader, a smart unit head, an intentional boss, a C-suite executives who understand this become very intentional on how best they build their environment just so that they get the kind of result they want. I will stop here today. If you have questions, you can drop, for me. I will look into it. And then for those who may want to have access to this book, um, Building a Healthy Workplace, there's an ebook on it that explains a little bit further, definitely with depth. I think you can use it to guide you as a guide. And even in the book, we have frameworks that frames this in the most simplest way that you can follow through. But then also, if you need some engagement by personal coaching, for instance, or you want me to facilitate a training, I'm also available for that. But at the end of the day, the key word is that the focus is transformation. The focus is to move people from human liability to the place of becoming human assets. Organizational culture should be more intentional, not just be beyond the talks and even the trainings, and the boards. It has to be a lifestyle where every organization is engineered to make sure that every team member perform at their optimum. They bring their brain, they bring their heart, they bring their hands to the table. This is what guarantees growth. Whatever the organization, whatever the focus and the drive for which that organization has. The key word is that when the human being is complete and present in the process, you get the best of results you never thought possible. Because believe you me, while organization, like I said, why technology will always bring speed, efficiency to the table. When you have a human being who is properly anchored, fully aligned, their head, their heart, and their hands, you're going to get a result much more than what you think is possible. So do have a very beautiful day. Have a nice day. Like I said, you have a question, please drop. Until then, I will see you next week, Monday.